Through her assemblage art and photography, she recognizes and celebrates the extraordinary in the ordinary. She extracts and highlights beauty and meaning wherever she finds it, with pieces that are quirky, striking, and unique. On this edition of Art Now, we'll explore the offbeat narratives and unusual perspectives of the works of Melissa Mitchell.
Hi, welcome to Art Now, a program where we talk to artists whose work is part of our community. I'm Pat Salmon, and I'll be your host. Our guest today is Melissa Mitchell. As an undergraduate at the University of Illinois, Melissa briefly worked on a degree in interior design, but she ultimately ended up concentrating on English literature. She spent her working career as a writer and editor for the University of Illinois News Bureau, covering the art beat for many years. During this time, she took community art classes, but it was with her retirement that she began to dedicate much of her time to making art. Assemblage art and photography became her passions, and her work has been exhibited and received awards in many local venues. In 2012, her digital photo, Studio Still Life, was chosen as the signature image for the Boneyard Arts Festival sponsored by 40 North 88 West. In 2013, her digital photo, Aloft, was selected for 40 North's Sky Gallery Billboard project. For the past 2 years, she has been the volunteer communications coordinator for the Idea Store in Champaign. And this year, she was one of the lead organizers of Hatch, the store's first ever creative reuse art festival. Melissa, welcome and thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Now, I know that during your childhood, you participated in all kinds of arts, photography, singing, acting, crafts. But can you tell us more about your gradual move as an adult from writer to artist?
As you say, I have been doing that, making art of some form or another all my life, even while I worked. But with having all of that time open up, it sort of pushed the art forward. And in the first year after I retired, I wasn't sure what direction I was going to go, but I was fortunate enough to retire early. So I knew I would be doing something. I didn't know if it would be fiction writing, if it would be more concentrating on the art making, starting a business, who knows. So I gave myself a year to just sit back, observe, let things happen and flow on their own. And incredibly, what happened was I found myself getting back into photography, which I'd done for 30 years, but it had not been on my list. So it all started with just taking my camera with me everywhere. What they teach young photographers always is you don't get the shot if you don't have the camera with you. So that started. I also had my studio where I made my assemblage art in the basement, and that's not a very conducive location for making art. I was always dragging things upstairs or walking past it, and I had all of, when you make assemblage art, you tend to collect fodder for it that just winds up being everywhere. And unfortunately, I wasn't being able to really even see what I had. So after a year into my retirement, this studio space opened in the Lincoln Building, downtown Champaign, and I jumped on it. And I had an artist friend who suggested, I originally thought I would just be doing more painting in here, and I didn't want to drag all of that stuff from the basement out. And my friend said, no, you must take everything there. And she was right, because as I unpacked things, downloaded things out of the boxes, pieces started to emerge. And materials that I didn't even know I had because I couldn't see them all the time were right there. And I think I made about a dozen pieces in the first month after I moved into the space.
Yes, that's great. Now, you actually began making art in the mid-1990s before you retired, when you channeled what you called your flea market maven, estate sale queen sensibilities into creating assemblage art, most of which is narrative. We're going to look at a few pieces here now. This first one is called Tina.
Yeah, and actually the longer title that I didn't give to you beforehand is Tina the Ballerina. That was sort of inspired by an exhibition I saw of Louise Bourgeois' work at the Granard Art Museum from her earlier days when she used to pick up wood on streets of New York and come back and build with that. I had that piece and two others that are actually behind you here that were part of a series. Tina the Ballerina, Queen Bee, which was made from a newel post, and a bunch of other salvage pieces. And Iris that has again, it's right behind you. It's got the blue eye of the lamp. But I started making the assemblage art before I even knew there was such a thing, or assemblage as they say in French.
Right.
But I just basically, it grew out of this picking up interesting objects and things at flea markets and decorating my home with these things I have done for years. All of my friends have been in awe. They think I have the coolest stuff and just know how to put that together. So it really was an extension of that, and there was no great thought ahead of time. It's just things, and that continues to this day.
Yeah.
Things just suddenly come together.
Go together.
So yeah, Tina the Ballerina actually came from the title from a record album that I used to play as a 5-year-old dancer at home over and over and over again.
That's great.
Tina, and she's got a little tutu on her. You can see that.
That's great. Okay, this next one is called Chained Melody.
Yeah, that's one of my more recent pieces that was exhibited in Hatch, the Idea Store's Creative Reuse art exhibition. There were a few components to the art fair. That was at Indigo Gallery. And the creepy baby doll heads, I keep finding them and bringing them home, and people, they come to me too sometimes from friends when you make
Sure.
this type of art, and this seems to be a concurrent theme among other assemblage artists I've talked to. Their friends will leave things at their doorstep in the backyard. You don't always know where they came from. But,
That's interesting.
yeah, and when I moved into the space, the other two artists who were in the space at the time got excited because they were putting together a show for the Boneyard Art Festival that next year called the Doll Show. And they saw me unload. I just had 1 or 2 doll pieces, and they said, "Oh, you'll fit right in." So that there was sort of a theme from then on that they seem to still follow me around. But.
Okay, and this one is I Guy.
Yeah, just another fun little piece. We found these doll eyeballs up at the Junk Bonanza in Shakopee, I believe it is, Minnesota, a suburb of Minneapolis, St. Paul. That was just a wonderful place to go. The vendors have some assemblage art, but a lot of it is just materials and fodder for people who collect these things and artists who make. So yeah.
Okay. Heads Will Roll. In fact,
Yeah,
it's
that's
similar to the one we have right next
it
to
is.
us.
It started out with a wig head. I love this piece because I like to tell people it's interactive because you can actually grab a hold of that, which was a base apart from a lamp once upon a time, but it's got all these snaky tentacles coming out of it, and you just give it a spin, and it just sort of wobbles
That's
around.
great.
Yeah.
Okay, this is Nesting.
Yeah, and that one is not too complex. It's just, oddly enough, that the base was a piece that I had procured from the same salvage warehouse in Indianapolis, which is long, long gone. But it's the way this evolved. It reminds me a lot of my whole decorating style, where I have for years just brought these pieces home and then I layer things onto them. And so while it's not so complex, it shows people how you really don't have to do a whole lot to just, kind of tap your imagination and think differently about the things you see around you.
Right.
You don't have to go out to Walmart and buy knickknacks. You
Right.
can find them
Right.
in all kinds of curious places.
Okay, this one is Past President.
Past President, the title comes from the little pin badge that she has in front of her. So, and the piece doesn't remind me of my mother, but my mother was a past president from my grade school PTA, and so she had things like that among her
Right.
relics when we cleaned out her space. But yeah, that one was the first to evolve after I moved into my studio and the doll show was coming.
Yeah. At this point, I was just going to ask a little bit about what your process is when you're starting a piece.
That's a good question. I recently heard another assemblage artist talk about this, and I sat there on the sidelines just thinking that I was channeling her or something, because it tends to be the same for all of us. We accumulate these things. Sometimes we walk past them a million times. They don't come together until that one moment where you just, and maybe it's the 50th time you've walked past that piece, and in the studio space they may be only 3 feet apart, but they suddenly take form.
Yeah.
And once that happens, it's like something is coming through you, and you don't stop until, usually until it's finished.
That's great.
So other times it will take a little bit longer to evolve.
Yeah. Okay, let's look at some additional ones here. This is Penelope.
And that's a good example of what I just mentioned. The base, which is one of these souvenir abalone trivets. And then there's a piece from the glasses, I think from another lamp base. Those I adhered, and it was just kind of beautiful sitting there on its own, but it sat around for I don't know how long, until I came across the top cage part of it. And the pig was in there. That was another idea store find. We disassemble trophies a lot there.
Yes.
And people can make all kinds of fun things with. But I actually had been doing that for years before the idea store came around. I have those in my house. So one night it just all came to. Somebody told me that has something to do with being a gutter cap or something. The cage, but it was sort of broken apart. So it's called Penelope Goes on Holiday. So the pig is breaking out of her cage.
Okay.
An artist friend of mine in Maui loved that when she saw a photo of it online, and immediately wanted to do a trade for it, which is a fun way for artists to.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, this next one is Put a Bird on It.
Yeah, and that's another example of something that actually a vendor at the Junk Bonanza gave me the base free. It's from an old, child's tractor, or it's not a tractor. Someone told me it's like part of the cart that they carry around behind the tractor, and I'm drawn to that patina. I love the rust, and it's just sort of an as found, which I added on to. I've done a lot of things recently with the telephone wire that I tend to make nests out of, and that has a good home now too.
Okay, this is September Love.
And that's one of my older pieces, probably around 2000, 2001. I began making the cigar box shrines, and I like to change it up. Sometimes they'll go on the wall, sometimes they go on a base or a pedestal, sometimes I take apart the rest of the box and turn it into a house or some sort of structure. September Love is because the cake toppers in there have gray hair.
Oh,
so
that's great.
It's romance found later in life.
That's wonderful. Okay, Snow White.
Yeah, and that's another one similar to Penelope, sort of made around the same period of time. Just more, the base was something I had around for years and painted a strange color combination at one point, never quite knew what to do with it. And somehow it just all came together with the light casing that I found at an antique store. And it just begged to have something or someone in it, and why not Snow White?
Okay, and this is Tart.
And that's one that I guess some of my first forays into the idea store, I brought home the child's toy, and happened to have a doll head lying around in parts, and it instantly came together. The name comes from the fact that on the side of it it says start. I don't know. It
Oh.
was some sort of organ toy that
Yeah.
you apparently must have had to insert something into.
Okay.
So I painted the sides and the front black
Mhm.
and just left the tart.
Yeah.
'Cause she looks a little tardy,
Yes.
a little dolled up, you might say.
Right. Okay, this next piece is a mixed media collage.
Mhm.
Do you want to say a little bit about this work?
Yeah, that's one of my more recent pieces, and I have been for the past couple of years doing things with 2D mostly collage and mixing photography and mixed media.
Mhm.
That process, the base of that process evolved out of a series of artist workshops at something called Art Fest in Port Townsend, Washington that I attended, which was a wonderful gathering of about 500 artists in an ideal setting on an old military base. And I loved the process, which is a lot of layers of paint, pan pastels, and the photos. It was what you usually do with it, and a bunch of other types of markers and things. But in this case, I decided I wanted to try to just sort of, pop out of that border and that dimension
Mhm.
and add some of those things. And last summer, I got my photography. I use my own home and gardens and backyard as a lab. And I had all of these 40s figurines that I had outside on a
Yeah.
big rusty thing that I can't even begin to describe that I hauled home once that
Mhm.
serves as a shelf in my backyard. And I just did a lot of arranging of those. And once I started to put that together, and sometimes this happens where political messages, cultural, historical
Mhm.
content starts to evolve from somewhere from within, even though that might not have been the original intention. And with that one, I've always been sort of concerned about those pieces. They're historical.
Mhm.
Those in particular are from the 40s. We've all seen them at antique shops.
Mhm.
They're always very colorful.
Mhm.
But they seem to be stereotypes to me, which I'm not
Yeah.
real big on, but
Yeah.
they're there.
Mhm.
And it goes back a little bit further to that early 20th century interest in Orientalism, they called it back
Right.
in that day.
Right.
The exotic. And so this also is about appropriation. If you look at the images closely, you might realize that one of them is Japanese, one is Chinese. The tea container that's been photocopied and photographed is from Hong Kong.
Mhm.
And I know in a lot of cases, we're not always aware. We see Asian people among us, but we don't know really what their culture is
Right.
because we don't dig
Right.
any further
Right.
as Americans.
Right.
Same with Latin American and South American cultures.
Right.
So there's a little bit of a message in there, but also I think people have historically been drawn to that because the colors are just beautiful, and that's part of it for me. Color is very important
Right.
in my life and in
Right.
my work.
Right.
The beauty.
Okay. The next group of pieces we'll look at are photos. You really began focusing on photography after you retired. And a theme that runs through your work, as you've said, is recognizing and celebrating the extraordinary in the ordinary. So we'll look at a few of your photos with that in mind.
Okay.
This first one is Aloft, and this is the one that was chosen for Sky Gallery.
Right.
Mhm.
It's just a milkweed vine seed pod that I held up to the light in my backyard. It grows across the bushes in my backyard. And illustrates what I was saying earlier about a lot of times that you just look at those things that are all around you, but look at it in part of it is having that time to sit back and observe and study, I think.
Yeah. Okay, this next one is Studio Still Life, and this was the image used last year for the Boneyard Festival.
And another example of we're just surrounded by these ordinary objects that have beauty if you look at them in a certain light. It was the 10th year. They were looking for something with that 10 theme, but that's just simply an old vase that sits in my studio that had you can't see many of the paintbrushes in the way that it's gotten cropped out, but paintbrushes and knitting needles that I used to stick into wig heads and things,
Right.
people would see that and thought that I knitted, and no, I don't. Or I use them for other tools.
Mhm. Okay. This next one is titled Art Car.
Yeah, and the Art Fest that I mentioned earlier, that was something that we saw when we were out and about on this former military base campus. So one of the people who was attending the workshop had driven there, and this car was just covered with stuff.
Mm.
So that's just a detail from that car.
Okay. This is Send in the Clown.
Yeah, another example of just the weird things in my house that when the light comes in the morning, back when I was working, it was always difficult because I needed to be getting to work, and I
Right.
would stop and I would see the light and I'd have to go find my camera. And that was the best part of that first year of retirement, was
Right.
realizing I can just do this if I want to.
Isn't that nice? Okay. This one is Escobar's Sunflower.
Yep, another example of just having that camera with me everywhere. I had met a couple of friends for work, for lunch,
Mm-hmm.
and have been meeting regularly for many, many years. We were on the YWCA board on campus originally, so we had eaten at Escobar's, and
Mhm.
I walked outside to my car and noticed sunflowers everywhere on the side of the building
Mhm.
that he has planted, and I just...
Oh, that's wonderful.
It was a wonderful little oasis on a
Mhm.
hot day, and that's just one of the sunflowers.
That's great. This one I particularly like. This is Frozen Leaves Aqua.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I don't do a lot of over manipulation with my photos. I tend to go for real colors. I mean, I may mess with them a little bit, just like a photo processor would, to
Mhm.
have the right saturation, but I don't normally like things that are just obviously photoshopped, or in my case, I photoed.
Mhm.
But that was something I was playing with in the backyard when I had left something outside that froze, and I dumped it out, and it
Mhm.
was just beautiful. It had the
Mhm.
fall leaves in it. I have played with that image in lots of different colors, and even done some mixed media things with it, with
Yeah.
colored pencils on top of it. But that was kind of recent that I played with that after it had sat and been other things, that,
Mhm.
which is fun about photography. You can go back and just sort of paint with
Yeah.
what you have as raw material.
Okay, this one is Lilac.
Yeah, just a close-up of a lilac, which is one of my favorite spring flowering shrubs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting then when you also compare it to Metallica. They're somewhat similar.
Yeah, except one is real and one is not. One is
Mhm.
just one of those rusty, it's actually a magnet that is on the fence that protects one of my gardens from rabbits. And yeah, it's just kind of a fun image.
Okay, this is Nola Potion.
You'll notice there's a theme. I love those bright colors that just
Mhm.
pop.
Mhm.
And that was taken in New Orleans. We were on our way to the zoo for the day and had stopped off along the way on St. Charles Avenue to eat. And it was just a combination of those colors and signs and a little bit of a tilt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and their tilt is kind of in this one, next one too, which is paint cans.
Yeah, once again, it's another one of those examples of just the ordinary. I was looking through my photo files, and I sort of liked that one when I first saw it. I took a lot of other images that I loved that were a lot of rusty junk behind a sugar mill in Kahului, Maui, Hawaii. And this was an area where people could come and recycle their paints, and it's the kind of thing I think most people just walk by and they dump off their paint, and what I saw was an image.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Finding that extraordinary in the ordinary.
Yes. This is called Patina, Yellow Chair.
Mhm.
And again, as you said,
Yeah,
it's
there seems to be a theme
extraordinary
here.
in the
It's just
ordinary.
over and over again. I have
Yeah.
a lot of those old metal chairs in my backyard that have to be painted and sanded every couple of years. That one was actually taken at this wonderful place in Michigan that's just a junker's delight inside and out, and things stay out there year after year. And I've been there year after year, and there'll probably be a little more, another layer of color showing. But I like to get in close, and that's again where I think it takes it into a whole other realm where you're seeing from a different eye than what most people usually see through.
Okay, this one.
Maybe we should stop now because it was another one of these haunts. This was a salvage shop in Des Moines that's 3 floors. They have a TV show now.
Oh my gosh.
Like on one of the cable channels.
Right.
I've never seen it, but it's made at this salvage shop. And what I also learned in the last few years, because I can't just keep bringing this stuff home, since I carry my camera around, I don't have to bring things home constantly from salvage shops, and I'll capture the image, and that's enough for me. And in this case, it was just those old heating grates, but again, it had that patina of many years of painting,
many layers,
and repainting, and it was some aquas and reds, and again just tilting the camera at a certain angle and catching the detail. So use your imagination.
Right. Okay, this one is Zip It Up.
That's up close in a bin at the Idea Store, and I produce, edit, write much of their newsletter that comes out about every couple of weeks. So I'm always, and I do their Facebook page. I'm one of the voices. And so I always have my camera there. And it's always about taking images of inventory. And a lot of times, just because that's what I like to do, I'll hone in on things and just come up with, again, just a bunch of zippers. But if you take them at a certain angle, you get an image that is a little bit surprising.
Okay, and this last one, and I'll let you pronounce it, is?
In Kahului. It's a sugar mill that's kind of an icon there on the island. You can always tell what direction the wind is blowing by looking at where the smoke is coming from there. And I was there with a artist friend who likes to get down and dirty and behind the scenes, and we took that photo, and she's like, you have to stop and take that, and I said, I know, we've been driving past there before, and yes, I want to stop and take it. And then later that day we were nosing around back there through all the junk. But it's one of a series of kind of more recent photos I've been taking lately that are alternate environments, I like to call them, or alternate landscapes. So I think people think of a landscape as being this expansive, beautiful, pastoral, and I have some others from the South, from train windows, even that, again, that decay and patina, that theme always emerges.
Right. Okay, last question for you. You've named your art-making business Acme Elfworks. How did you come up with that name?
Yeah, there's always a story behind everything. My space is in the Lincoln Building in downtown Champaign, which is one of these wonderful old noir-y, I like to call it, buildings where you sort of expect Garrison Keillor's Guy Noir to come around a corner, and it's got it's just got all of those wonderful old features, and that's an era where you think of the Acme this and the Acme that. And as I was trying to put together a name for the studio, it hit me, and I looked it up, and I realized, because I thought I knew this from the past, that Acme stands for a company that makes everything. And I thought, well, that's pretty perfect here, because I don't just stay with one genre. I like to mix them up and move on. And I'm not even sure where the elf came from, but next thing I knew, people were giving me elves. And I guess actually it started because I started to amass an army of what I call evil elves. I had one that I'd had for years, and I collected a bunch of them on eBay that have never quite made it into a piece. They've sort of become the mascots here. But I also like to say that, especially the kind of odd art that comes out of me from who knows where, it's not me doing it, it's the elves. I'm the artistic director, and they're the ones that are working into the wee hours. So it's my own little mythology, and it's
Right.
almost becoming a brand, which
That's
is kind
great.
of silly.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching Art Now. Our guest today has been Melissa Mitchell. You can see her art locally at Wind, Water, and Light in Lincoln Square, Urbana, and at Vintage Karma in Tuscola. You can also read her blog and contact her at www.acmeelfworks.blog.com. We hope that you enjoyed today's show, and we also hope it will inspire you to explore the local art scene and to make your own art now.